Here are my thoughts from an outsider's perspective on the Watchtower 2022 convention Friday afternoon first video. They jump right in with a music montage showing JWs sharing JW literature in various countries and settings. As it plays, the music switches to a song in Russian with no English subtitles, though they do include some sign language. I'm still not sure what they're singing about. Maybe it's a Watchtower song that most JWs would already be familiar with. Next, it moves into what I gather is a bright, shiny promotional about Watchtower facilities, showing all sorts of happy-looking JWs in various scenes there. Is that a little glimpse of Paradise Earth I see? Maybe that's the intent, since that's what the opening song is all about, as long as you keep your eyes on the prize. The first talk is by Samuel Hurd to discuss more about all of that. He starts by quoting from Isaiah 65, in which Isaiah is prophesying God's blessing on his remnant and his curse on the rebellious. He parlays that into the Watchtower's claim to be providing Jehovah's spiritual food to their followers, even calling it a banquet that is spiritually nourishing. Then we have a video presentation with lots of food, drawing a line between Watchtower Productions and the food they will feast on in the new earth. That is such an audacious claim when you think about it. It's like they're trying to mix the teachings about Paradise Earth and themselves so that their followers will place their hope and faith in both things as if they're basically the same thing. But how many witnesses even think to question the veracity of it? I know they've been conditioned not to, and that's the really sad thing. He continues on in this direction until he actually says, "Be sure to thank Jehovah for the spiritual food he provides." Translation: be sure to thank Jehovah for the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society Corporation. Be thankful to Jehovah for us. He's been going to great lengths to tell you how the organization is providing the spiritual food in their publications, videos, etc. And now he tells witnesses that they should thank Jehovah for that. So what I'm hearing here is that not only is he mixing the organization in with their Paradise Earth teaching, but also with Jehovah himself. And how can you show your appreciation? By studying the materials more and doing more work for your Kingdom Hall. Next we move on to Brother Ronald Curzon to tell us about Jehovah's promises about Paradise Earth, comparing the Israelites returning home after being taken captive and having lots of work ahead of them to rebuild. JWs are taught that in the beginning of Paradise Earth there will be a lot of work to do because the earth will be such a mess after all the non-JWs have made such a mess of it, and of course because of all the dead bodies from Armageddon. To tug at your heartstrings, he goes on to share some testimonies from JW women who have lost their home or job to natural disasters, but are still happy because they have the Watchtower Brotherhood and are looking forward to the new system that they keep hearing about and reading about from the organization. And then next is a video doing exactly that. He makes sure to let JWs know that this is a picture of the near future. Haven't they been saying that for well over a century now? What do they mean by words like near and imminent? Do words like that have a secret meaning that only Watchtower knows? Or is it possible they keep using such terms in order to keep JWs off balance and trying to be ready for anything by staying totally connected and loyal to the organization? Fear and urgency can be extremely powerful tools to control people, can't they? I mentioned fear because even though they focus so much on Paradise Earth, what that also communicates is an impending Armageddon that they may not even make it through if they don't work hard for the org all the time. So what you end up with is both fear tactics and the carrot on the stick that is always moving forward, just out of reach. Then it's on to Leonard Myers to talk about one of their favorite phrases: the wolf and the lamb will feed together. They sure like to compare themselves to the Hebrew nation in the Old Testament, don't they? I've noticed that they also like to talk about prophecy having a current spiritual fulfillment, which is so vague and novel that it could really mean anything you want it to. And along those lines, they like to call themselves a spiritual paradise, as if being in the organization is almost the same thing as being in paradise. They also like to talk about people being able to transform their personalities through knowing about Jehovah. That's not actually in the Bible, it's Watchtower lingo, and I can understand why they make these things up. They don't see Jehovah transforming any of their members, taking the old heart of stone and replacing it with the heart of flesh, taking the sinful, rebellious sinner and regenerating him into a new creature who loves the Lord and his law. He's not doing that for JWs because they won't trust in Christ alone for their salvation. And of course, you can see why they won't do that either, since they believe him to be a mere angel, not the second person of the Godhead. Their Jesus is powerless, so they have to endeavor to change their own personalities to earn this supposed paradise earth. Then he prepares the way for the next video, talking about a criminal who changed his personality and how people can look forward to peace with men and animals. And after the video, he keeps going on about it, throwing around more proof texts from the Old Testament, very repetitive. Finally, he finds a place to throw the word peace in, so that he can try and tie it all back into the theme of the convention, even though it's the same thing they're always talking about, with or without a theme. Next, it's on to James Mance to carry on with the same format, this time focusing on no more physical suffering. I found it very odd that he claims the Jewish people didn't suffer any physical ailments while they were in Babylon captivity. Where does the Bible say that? I've never even heard of anyone suggesting it before this guy. Is this something JWs have been taught for years? Please let me know in the comments if you know. Then he talks about the organization being a worldwide spiritual healing program. As a Christian who has never been in the org, this whole part just sounds so ridiculous to me. It's like he's just making stuff up as he goes. All his claims are in a spiritual sense. I've noticed from talking with JW friends that they really use the term in a sense a lot to turn just about anything into such a vague idea that they can make it mean anything they want. My friend has also explained to me that after Armageddon, people will still have their physical ailments, and very slowly over time will start to feel better. I noticed he doesn't bring that up in this video. He makes it sound like suddenly everyone will be totally healed, and more on that later. Could that be some new light, perhaps? Then he introduces the next video, which sets up the us versus them theme, showing a supposed scene of an evil church, and then going over to some happy good JWs having their Watchtower studies. After the video, he starts talking about all the confidence they have that Paradise Earth really will happen because apparently Jehovah has healed them spiritually. Without being born again, which they are taught they should never want, what does that even mean? These sorts of comments would have to create some anxiety in the average Jehovah's Witness, wouldn't they? Deep down, they must know they have not experienced any sort of spiritual healing, whatever that means. So that's the same as the physical healing they're supposed to be looking forward to? But then, I guess, these videos are so boring and simple that many aren't really paying attention by this point anyway, and are just trying to feel some of the feelings that the music in the videos tries to produce. And again, another comment. What a blessing it is to be taught by Jehovah, which really means what a blessing we are to all of you. That's the standard way that they use so often in their publications and talks, referring to themselves basically in the third person, so that what they're doing doesn't look so obvious, I guess. Next, he talks about how there will be miraculous healing happening on Paradise Earth. And he made it sound like it was going to happen pretty quickly after Armageddon, as I said before. Again, this sounds like maybe some new light, since, at least from the way my JW friend describes it, they had been previously teaching that this would be a slow, gradual process of feeling better and better, not sudden miraculous healing. Now, as a Christian, of course, I believe in miracles. But will anyone need to have a miraculous healing in the new heavens and the new earth? No. Christians will have been resurrected in our glorified bodies, already free from sin and death, just as the Bible promises. But far above all of that, what we look forward to is being in the presence of Jesus forever. This is not a hope for JWs because their Jesus is such a limited being and a minor point in their teachings. So they focus instead on what they believe he can give them, such as petting wild animals, building a nice house, lots of fruit baskets everywhere, and of course, lots of going door to door still, because that's still what they will do. And finally, on to Gerrit Loesch, who continues with more verses from Isaiah. I know they tend to focus almost exclusively on verses from the Old Testament and rarely the New Testament in these sorts of talks, and that is certainly proving to be true in this video as well. Then he talks about how Jehovah has brought people back to life figuratively in the past. What? Was Lazarus not really raised? Why wouldn't he focus on that? What about other people who were resurrected? Were they all just really figurative too? But no, he's actually just not focusing on them at all, even though he's talking about resurrection, apparently. And what hope does a figurative resurrection provide to us real human beings? But then he goes on to talk about his so-called examples of, first, referencing the Jewish people being released from Babylonian captivity. With all the instances of actual resurrection, why did he need to go there? Because he's not really talking about resurrection at all, in my opinion. And then he draws that into their teaching that Jesus chose them as the one true religion in 1919, which is actually back when they were still worshiping Jesus and celebrating Christmas. He suggests that God's people were in the same thing as Babylonian captivity all the way up until 1919. I may have to ask my JW friends some more questions about this. Were Russell's followers still in captivity up until then? And where was that organization that Jehovah has always had up until then? Another possible point of new light is that he says the faithful and discreet slave was appointed in 1919. But in their books, they were already calling Russell the faithful and discreet slave. So were they wrong about that? I really will have to ask some more questions, because they say so many conflicting things about 1914 and 1919 that I have a hard time keeping it straight sometimes. I'm guessing maybe they do too. That would be understandable. It all seems to be adjustable, depending on whatever subject they're trying to focus on at the time. He also talks about death being no more. But JWs do believe death is possible in Paradise Earth, and the ones I've talked with so far don't even seem to think about what comes after the 1,000 years. But from what I understand, they would still consider death possible even then because of free will to sin and die. Then it's back to Loesch, who reminds us that only JWs worship Jehovah properly. He then gets into a list of all the things you can get if you remain faithful to the organization. Jesus is not on that list anywhere, of course. And then he brings up the friendship with God theme yet again, this time saying Jehovah will be our best friend. They end with a song about focusing on the most important things and using discernment. Now, I agree with that, at least on the surface. It is important to use discernment. If only JWs would use discernment and come to see how much false teaching they are being fed. It's rotten food right to the core. The whole song is about work, 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 though, to make Jehovah glad, not about practicing any real discernment. In fact, these songs seem to be more about getting the rank-and-file JWs to just turn their brains off and do whatever they're told instead. Well, that's it for this one. I'll share my thoughts on afternoon video number 2 later on in the coming week. God bless.